here? Well, first of all, thank you for volunteering to do this, Adam.
My pleasure.
I did make you co-host. Congratulations.
Promotion.
And this is Adam Krieger. Adam and I go back, I don't know how many years, and Adam is the executive director at Warren Township Youth and Family Services. And I'm going to turn everything over to Adam, and he's going to kind of cover some of the things that he feels are important for us to know about his profession and his services that he provides, and what his credentials are and his experiences, and we'll hopefully have some questions for if the class has of Adam. So here you go, Adam.
Great, thank you. Listen, it's wonderful to meet all of you. Actually, so where are you all right now? What town are you in?
Aurora.
Oh, you are in Aurora. Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful. So I'm up here in Gurnee. Right, I'm literally down the road from Great America, Gurnee Mills, if any of you are up this way. And so I've done this many times. In fact, I actually have a call just from this morning from somebody who is looking to change their career. And she left me a message and said, I've lived in the community for many years and I'm thinking about changing to social work. Can I talk to you? I just want to kind of find out about the career, about opportunities, about what it looks like financially. And so I think one of the most important things is for people like myself who've been doing this for a while to share our experiences with all of you. My understanding, and Mark, correct me, so everybody here, are you all BSWs or are you folks that are considering BSW or MSW programs down the road? Tell me a little bit about this group.
Go ahead, Joyce.
I think we're all BSW, right? Yeah.
Are you able to hear that?
Yeah, they're all BSWs?
Yeah, the last semester.
Good. So you're committed. You have no option but to go into this profession. Fantastic. Keep it that way. No, seriously, I do like to know that because sometimes I go out to Columbia College here in Gurnee, and often I'll have a real mix of students. Some people are just taking a social work class just to kind of test the waters. Other people are committed. I'm assuming if you're BSWs, I know some people may go off in different directions, but it's good for me to know. It kind of tells me that you are folks who have some commitment to this field and to some of the ideas. And I'll definitely take a moment to talk about that. But when I've done these, I really do appreciate you knowing that please interrupt me if you have a question in the moment. Don't feel like you got to save everything to the end. If it is something I think I'm going to talk about later, I may just say, hey, I'll get to that. But this is way more interesting than seeing some big head on a screen drone on for an hour about what he does. So please feel free to jump in and we'll have a conversation. So I just a quick little history about me. I got into this profession. My mother is a social worker. She was a school social worker, and then she did some private practice stuff. She's now retired. And I got into the profession really more as a volunteer. I thought I was going to be the next Steven Spielberg. I was into film and art, and that was the direction I was heading. But during college, I got in the bug to just sort of volunteer. And for me, that sort of feeling that came with helping, and I started becoming very interested in also in sort of the political and the social realities of why people wind up in the situations they wind up in. And so I definitely was pulled towards the social work ideal, just at some very basic level, the notion that we help people within systems. And those systems may be all the very bureaucratic institutions and businesses and socioeconomics and everything. And I really wanted to understand how this stuff worked, affected people, and then I wanted to be part of a profession that could help. And so I came out of undergrad and with really absolutely no experience, I wound up working in the projects of Chicago. My third day on the job, I was standing in the middle of like Robert Taylor homes, going to meet clients. It was really truly an amazing experience for somebody such as myself who had not been exposed to that, to really have the experience of working within communities where I had to show a great deal of humility. I had to really accept and understand that the clients I'm working with were experiencing and living life in a way that was very foreign to me at that time. And I had to really just learn to listen, just observe, listen really carefully, and ask the question, what can I do to help? And I got a job that was kind of in a child protective role, involved with the court systems in Cook County. And so that was a great experience for me. It really introduced me to the profession very quickly. And then from there, after about a year and a half or so of that, I did go into grad school. I had my master's by the time I was 25. I'm not saying that's the right path for everybody. We can talk a little bit about that. Some people really probably should just kind of finish their master's and stay in the field and just kind of absorb it and figure out what they want to do. I kind of figured out my path pretty quickly, and I went into an MSW program. Some of you, I assume, coming out of Aurora, all of you will be at advanced standing. So I think, what is it? You have that 5-year period if you do your master's, and you'll have it done in about a year. Am I correct? Is that a 5-year window?
Yeah.
It is? Okay. That's great. Something to really, potentially take advantage of. I've had a number of interns with advanced standing. It's just amazing how fast they start and then they're done with their masters. So got my master's, wound up at Allendale. I encourage everybody, if they can, to have an experience like in Allendale. I don't know if you're familiar with Allendale, but it's a very large residential program. I think it's great to work in a hospital, residential program, something where you're dealing with very severe psychiatric issues. Because I often meet people, therapists, others in this profession, who have never really had to deal with the extremes. They've never had to deal with extreme lack of resources, extreme mental health and psychiatric issues. And if you get that experience under your belt early on, everything else is going to feel very balanced and measured. You're going to know how to handle those situations. I've met people with 20 years in the field and they've never made a hotline call. I mean, so there's just a real value to going into the trenches and getting some really great experiences like that. After Allendale, I wound up at Central Baptist, and I handled runaways, lockouts, and then a variety of general counseling services. And when I was 28 years old, I just accidentally overheard a conversation and about a job opportunity, and I wound up working, doing evaluations for sexual offenders. And it wasn't something I knew I was going to do. It just kind of happened by accident. And then I wound up doing that as a side job for almost 20 years. I only recently stopped doing it and started out doing evaluations then, but then for about 18 or 19 years, I worked with offenders. I did individual and groups, worked with the court system, probation. And so I'm happy, although that's not the focus of my discussion, I'm happy to talk about that or any other of my professional experiences. And then in addition to the current role, which I'll talk about, I also did court mediation. I did the 40-hour training of mediation. By the way, I would encourage any of you or all of you to consider doing that at some point. And then I also, probably a decade or more ago, started a practice called the Couples Place, a marital and relationship-focused therapy practice. And it's very successful, and it's something I do in the late evenings or on the weekends. So I'm also happy to talk about starting a practice and what that looks like and what's involved in that. But my primary role today is that I work as the executive director of Warren Township Youth and Family Services. And I've been here for, I'm just about to hit 20 years. And I'll tell you a little bit about kind of township structure, and then I'll tell you a little about our programs and what we do. But before I go on any further, does anybody have any general questions and anything for me before I go any further?
Not at this point, it looks
Okay.
like.
Okay, good. So as the executive director, okay, so let me back up. So you may or may not be familiar with township government. Before I came to work at a township, I actually knew nothing. I knew the term, but townships typically cover a larger area than, let's say, a municipality, but often smaller than a county. And so our township covers about 2 full municipalities, and then a variety of other geographic areas kind of surrounding us. And all township governments statutorily can develop a youth services program and department. You will find that most townships do not. And there's a host of reasons for that without getting too deep into it. But Warren Township is one of those townships that has a very well-funded and thriving youth services program. And so what I oversee on a day-to-day basis is we have counseling services. We do a variety of groups. We do parenting groups and then youth groups. And I'll get a little bit more into detail about them, but we do professional groups. We also do some non-clinical services. Like just yesterday, I had a volunteer lawyer come in and do what we call chat with a lawyer. It's free legal advice for 20 minutes. I mean, so we do things like that. I've done a lot of stuff over the years on budgeting because that's often a family stressor. So we've provided services on that. We also have a teen center, and that's a drop-in center. And we have, anywhere from 40 to as many as 70, 80 kids come in there through a day, just depending on the day. And so I oversee all those programs. And, a big part of my job, honestly, a big part of it is planning, but a big part of it is also just problem solving. On a day-to-day basis, I'm almost always pulled into something, whether it's a human resource issue, whether it's a program issue, a parent's upset about something, a complaint, a suggestion, and a lot of supervision, a lot of supervising of staff and helping provide direction and guidance for them. Particularly during COVID, people need to have a supervisor, director that they can come to and also process what's going on in their world. And so a big chunk of my time is around the clinical side of our services. And I also do see clients here as well. It's not a huge caseload, but I do see a handful of clients. I often pick up the clients when I can't get a case assigned out to a therapist because we're really busy and we don't have any openings. Those are often the cases I'll take. And so I also do clinical work, as I said. And then in terms of receiving counseling here, which counseling is really our core service. Above all else, we are a mental health center. And if I ever had to shut down other programs, and there have been times because of budget issues, I have had to pull back on other services. I never touch the counseling because that to me is our primary purpose here. And our eligibility is birth to 17 and then young adults 18 to 25. We call that emerging adult or young adults. The bulk of kids probably somewhere between middle school to the end of high school. That's probably the bulk of kids. We do get some younger children. In terms of eligibility, we are not a crisis center. We do not specialize in anything. We provide very generalized services. We get a lot of kids, particularly this period, particularly with COVID. I would tell you probably 70% of our intakes involve children, young adults with anxiety issues. What COVID and the lockdown and everything and the uncertainty has done to us has left us with a lot of children and young people who are often really struggling to make sense of the world. So we're getting a lot of anxiety, but we get anxiety, we get depression, a lot of ADHD, a lot of family issues, parents and kids that aren't getting along, conflict, a lot of motivational issues. In fact, it's one of those areas that I'd like to actually improve on and expand, which is very often just kids who just seem to lack any focus or motivation. And then we do get our severe cases. We get kids with severe trauma histories. And we can work with certain disorders, for example, like an eating disorder, to a certain degree. We have to be careful. Certain issues are very high risk, and a once a week kind of outpatient setting is not going to work for them. So when we have cases that are higher risk, we have to watch them very closely and decide at some point if we need to refer them out for more specialized care. In some cases, that might mean a PHP, IOP, inpatient, or send them to somebody like Mark, who specializes in substance abuse. because we don't specialize in those areas that we do have to make referrals. One of the wonderful things about working at a place like I do is it's non-competitive. Like we are not trying to steal any cases from anybody. We work really well with our local practitioners and for-profit agencies. If somebody's coming to see us and they want a referral, we are happy to refer them to anybody in the community. So it's a very non-competitive, very congenial, very supportive atmosphere that we have with our local providers. And the truth is that a very sizable percentage of people we're serving are those without insurance or on Medicaid, state card, something like that. So most of even, like I said, the private practices, they just don't view us as competition because we're often serving people who frankly aren't going to get served by them. I'm going to do, let me see if I can share. I'm going to show you guys a newsletter from before COVID hit. A lot of our services, things have kind of adjusted during COVID, but let me see if I can do share screen and show you something.
Should be able to.
Oh, no, I'm not seeing it. Oh, you know what? I wonder because I probably have it on the other. I have a dual monitor set up.
Oh, okay.
I just want to see something. Hang on a second, I didn't think about that. If I move? I want to see something. This is probably too
Yeah, I
simple.
haven't done it with co-hosting as far as share screen, but usually I don't have a problem if I'm the only host.
Yeah, no, I can see a bunch of my screens. Let me see if I can just actually, because I'd love to show you a newsletter. No,
Maybe it's,
okay. Nope, I'm gonna let that go, not worry about it. Okay, so I must have saved it in a place where I can't seem to access it because I have a dual screen setup. But here, I'm gonna move actually because now I'm facing the wrong direction. Let me do this. Okay, there we are. So yeah, I was just going to show you a newsletter. All it really is it just kind of sort of a visual illustration of what we have. So for example, one of the things I made a decision early on was that we have to break down stigma. We have to break down barriers to our services. When I started, and literally people would say this, oh, Warren Township Youth and Family Services, that's where the bad kids go. That's where the people go who don't have any other choices, and that is not a good motto for your business. I mean, no business is going to have the tagline, the only people who come to us is if they have to, right? That's not a very appealing, and what it does is it undermines people's comfort about getting help. And so I really made a committed effort to provide lots of programming to the general community so that they would perceive and see us as a resource, not just for when they're in trouble, but even as prevention, a place for parents to get knowledge and information. And so we've been doing, and we do a lot of partnerships, like I do partnerships with the library and with the park districts and others. And so we've got a workshop coming up on how to parent the child who worries too much. And I've got a fantastic presenter for that. We're going to be doing a workshop for parents on IEPs, 504s, education plans with an attorney. I've got a wonderful lawyer I've been doing this with for 10 years now. And then we've got a great workshop with the Park District on how to manage toddlers, particularly when they're throwing fits in stores and things like that. That's very appealing to parents of young children. And the goal is that they will associate us with very positive things. We do dances. We have a teen center. We also do a variety of very fun activities. I have an improv troupe I work with. They come out and do stuff. We do art therapy classes that are therapy, but it's very fun. We do social skills classes. Again, lots of fun. We make them very entertaining and engaging. And then we've come up with a really good model for parenting classes. We do a class called Parenting the ADHD Child. It's very short. It's only about 3 sessions. We do one called Parenting the Anxious Child. And then we also have a variety of services in Spanish, and that's a little bit newer for us, but that's been a huge commitment financially as well as just in terms of programmatically making it happen. But we've been very committed to also serving our Spanish-speaking population. So, and then our teen center is a drop-in center, And we also do integrate some clinical services into there. We get a lot of LGBTQ kids at the teen center. So it's very LGBTQ friendly. The kids are in the gay pride parade. Some kids just come there and hang out and make friends. Our biggest thing right now, and it's insane how big it is our we do D&D nights, Magic the Gathering, games, board games. Like that is some of our biggest stuff. On Wednesday nights, we're there till like 9 o'clock in the evening doing those kind of games, and we'll get like 30, 40 kids in. So we really try our best to figure out, and this is my pitch for why I believe every township should have youth and family services. When you're dealing at the county level, you're dealing with vast, complex communities and issues that are very different. Issues in North Chicago may not be the same as issues right on the border with Lake Bluff. It's amazing how different communities are often dealing with different things. And when you try to work with these things at a county level, my argument is it's just too complicated, and the county winds up focusing on a few things here or there. When you talk about township, we're kind of the perfect size. We're big enough that we can really pull in good resources, but we're small enough that I can really talk to the stakeholders and say to them on a regular basis, what do you need? What are you seeing in the community? What are the problems that kids, families, and people are having? And because we're so able to do that, we can connect with our communities, and I can pivot on a dime. This happened a few years back when cutting became a huge craze. And we had to pivot. And within a matter of like a few weeks, I got all my staff trained in how to work with kids who are cutting. We got all kinds of education. We put together about a bunch of workshops. And because we're dealing with a manageable size community, we can make those shifts that are much more difficult at larger levels. So I've just told you quite a bit about sort of the work I do and who we serve and the unique characteristics of a township program. Again, let me check in. Any questions at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
So does your agency have to do a lot of fundraising? Or
And that's a great question. So I am very fortunate in that we are largely supported by tax revenues. I do occasionally write some grants. And we did do some fundraising, and that we've done, actually, for example, we have an equestrian program, basically therapy with horses and people. And so we actually did fundraising because it's a very expensive program to run. So we raised about $5,000 in one evening, and that money is there for people who simply can't afford the cost of the program. So we'll do some very targeted fundraising like that. We're doing a suicide prevention campaign, and rather than charging people for the manuals, I want to just give them out. So again, I wrote a grant, got a small grant for like $1,200 to give out the manuals. But I am very fortunate. I largely funded through tax revenues. One other fantastic piece of that is once you accept grant money, particularly if you go into an agency with grants, you have to accept the fact that you don't have flexibility. Typically, once you take a grant, you are beholden to the people that are giving you that money and whatever structure they put in place. So that's also part of why I have so much flexibility. But great question. Some of you may work for places where, frankly, you'll be doing a lot of fundraising as part of your job. Any other questions? Okay.
Do you have?
Oh, no, mine was similar.
Oh, okay. Question is, what type of positions are open there?
Good question. So I've really tried to keep our administrative management level of this place very minimal. And what I mean by that is I've worked for very top-heavy organizations where you have lots of administration. And so we've worked really hard to keep our administrative level to a real minimum. So administratively, there's me. I've got a director of the teen center, and then I've got an office manager. But I actually do a lot of the frontline work. I go out to the schools. I work with clients hand on, directly. And our teen center director runs programs, and he's very hands-on. So that's a little bit about our administrative structure. We kept it very slimmed down, and we are not top-heavy. Then in addition to that, what we have is on the clinical side, I have therapists, both full-time and part-time. I have 4 full-time therapists and 2 part-time. And then we'll be having 3 interns coming in this fall. So we also, like I said, we got a pretty strong intern program. And then over at the teen center, that's a little bit different. We also over at the teen center have a variety of part-time staff as well as an assistant director there who does mostly direct hands-on programming. And then we have part-time staff. And actually those part-time staff are often college students. We pull very heavily from CLC. I think I would guess right now, probably all of our staff are taking classes either at CLC or at the University Center in Lake County. So that's a little bit about our structure. I didn't get into it because it's not my programming, but we also do have a senior center here. We have emergency services, food pantry, some other things like that. But we have a huge senior program, but I don't really run that. We're just friends with them, and they work here as part of the township.
What type of qualifications would you be looking for as far as some of the positions?
So for the therapists, we need a minimum master's. We'll take therapists who are not licensed. We prefer therapists who are licensed or close to getting a license, but we've absolutely had therapists who, I actually have, for example, a retired school social worker who let go of her license, but she's got about 35, 40 years in the field. She's phenomenal. She does sign language in addition, and so she works under my license. But ideally, we do like to have people with a master's and with a license. LCSW, LCPC, I'm fine with either. That's really not an issue. Sometimes I will get a licensed marital and family therapist as well, an LMFT. And we've actually even had PhD on staff. The PhDs are very hard for me to maintain because we're just not competitive. I can't really afford, and they can go out and make a lot more money, frankly.
So again, it would be LCSWs or LSWs? Does it 2 years postgraduate experience?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'll take somebody, a lot of it has to do with what their experience is. So for example, I don't care if they're working toward an LCPC or an LCSW or LMFT, it doesn't really matter to me. We'll get people who are coming out of grad school, but they were working in the field for 10 years before they went to grad school. They got great training at grad school, and we are happy to bring them in right out of grad school. But yes, I mean, like most people, of course, I love to get people who are more experienced and have some, have done some work because we're a small organization, and in that way, I can supervise them, but also know that they can function pretty independently. Now, obviously, internships are different. Internships, we're obviously not looking for that same kind of experience. So if you get into a master's program, consider us for an internship if you think this is something you would enjoy. Qualifications at Teen Center are very different. We really don't have any set qualifications. There's no licensing. There's just a different set of issues there. We're much more like a park district over at the Teen Center. So I think I kind of hit on some of the key things around sort of positions. And I know you had asked kind of like, what does a day look like in the life of somebody here? But let's just take a therapist, for example. They would come to work, and really most of the day is going to be spent doing therapy. It's going to be spent doing therapy. It may be involved doing some liaison work with a school social worker. I try to give staff plenty of time to do trainings and watch videos and read books and really feel confident in what they're doing. Some therapists do groups as well. I've had some therapists also help us. We do prevention work in the schools. We'll go into work in the schools and use a model called Erica's Lighthouse. And we do prevention work around suicide, mental health issues, trying to reduce stigma. So a staff person could help with any of that. This is a profession very often, unless you're working in a school, where you have to be open to the idea of working evenings. We used to do Saturdays, but I've kind of shut down our Saturday services. But this is a field where you really do need to do some evenings if you're going to do therapy, at least, because kids are just not available during the day. That's kind of what an average day looks like for the therapist here. Is this a good time to talk about trends in the field?
I'm sorry?
Is this a good time to talk about trends, kind of trends in the field?
Sure, I'm getting, heads are bobbing up and down, yes.
Okay. So this field has evolved tremendously since I started. And in some ways, you are very fortunate in that you're going to have way more opportunities than I think when I kind of got in this field in the 90s than I could have imagined. When I got in this field in the 90s, overwhelmingly, everybody wound up at nonprofits. And a relatively small percentage of people would ultimately go into private practice. Some people with enough experience might start their own. Most, if they're lucky, they would find a practice, they would join it, and they would just kind of be happy. And that's where they'd retire, typically. But overwhelmingly, everybody wound up, at least for a period of time, at least in the nonprofit world, schools, things like that, Catholic Charities, Allendale's, One Hope United, those kind of places. And that has really, really dramatically changed. I'm seeing these commercials for BetterHelp. They're sort of a monopoly now of online counseling. So what I'm seeing is a lot of people come in the field, in many cases, not even going near the nonprofits anymore. They're just going right into online therapy practices. You could sit at your kitchen table in your pajamas and a cup of tea at 2:00 in the morning and open up a practice online, do all the legal work, do everything in a matter of a day or two and have it all set up. That's how easy it has become for people to go online and set up their own practice. And it's very easy to join one of these large online practices as well. What I would tell you about nonprofit world is that what I'm hoping is that I'm seeing is it's becoming very difficult for me to hire therapists, because once therapists have a license, once they're qualified, they're very often going towards sometimes these more profitable opportunities. And so I think one of the challenges we're going to face in this field is how do we remind people about mission? Because I've always believed that social work, counseling, mental health services is very mission driven more than money driven for people. And usually most people I meet have a sense of mission. And so my hope is that as you consider what you're doing, is really consider the idea of going into the nonprofit world, at least for a period of time. Because the nice thing is you can do nonprofit and do, practice work and in private practice. You can do those simultaneously. So I don't mean to make it sound like it's it's one or the other, but definitely I hope that all of you consider the possibility of spending some time working in the nonprofit world. We really need talented people, and I can just tell you, I am blessed. I have phenomenal staff, phenomenal therapists, but I know people at some of the other child welfare agencies that they just cannot get restaffed. And some of this might be COVID, but this is a trend that's really been going on for about 10 years now. Now, having said that, don't let anybody ever tell you can't make a good living in this field. After you kind of, put in a little bit of time, you got to get your you have to get your master's. It's really hard to make anything in this field without your master's. Get licensed. But once you do that, this can be a very profitable field. What I would tell you is early on, try to get some sense of direction. The administrative route, you can make a very reasonable living in the administrative route. you're not going to become a millionaire, but there are plenty of people at administrative levels at places like Compass, which is a great program, or at the hospitals, or even in the child welfare agencies who are making 6-figure incomes. Now you don't get there right away; it takes time. You got to work your way up. But if you want to do administrative, it's a good idea to get a sense if that's an area of interest early on, because then I would suggest do some business classes. Try to get certified in maybe like nonprofit management over a summer. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do to build your resume to show you have those interests. And if you get into a casework job or therapist, let the administrative folks know, hey, I've got an interest in administration. They may very well kind of put you on a track. They might, after a couple of years, they might have you doing some supervision. They may have you take on a program. They may have you go after a grant. You may find a grant and then just choose to go after it. So there's lots of ways if you want to kind of go that track. But honestly, if you go into the nonprofit, if you go into the for-profit private practice route, again, you can really make a very good living. But I will also give an endorsement for school social work. School social work has a lot of your wonderful benefits. You can be part of the union, very stable once you get into a school. It's a very stable. I know lots of school social workers who've been at their schools for 20, 30 years. And it's frankly a very nice schedule. You're done by about 3 to 4 o'clock most days, and you've got the time off the teachers have off. It's a very nice path. You're not going to make a fortune, but you're not going to do bad. And again, you've got a very nice schedule. So it's important early on to kind of figure out what's important to you, because some of the choices you make now or in the next few years will affect what ultimately happens with you in your career. So that's just a little bit about the trends. I can just tell you, a therapist right out of grad school, going to a nonprofit, you're going to probably make in the 40s. If you get your license, you do it for a few years, you could definitely get up into the mid 50s, 60s. And then if you do add on some private practice work, a few hours, you could easily be making 60, 70, 80,000 a year, very realistically, with all the private practice opportunities that are out there now. Any questions about that side of it? I know as social workers traditionally don't like to talk about money, but I think it's really important to think about these things and ask yourself these questions and finding the right balance. So any questions about that part of it?
I've got a couple of other questions. If you got,
Please.
you ready? Man, sure. How long do people usually stay at your agency? Therapists? Is there a turnover rate? Is there?
So it's very interesting. We actually have a very, very low turnover rate. If I actually think about my therapist right now, let's see, one of them has been with us for 10 years, one for about 8 years. One was an intern with us and then became a full-time therapist. She's been on a combined probably here for 10 plus years. Even one of our more junior ones, she's probably been here about 5 to 6 years. She started out part-time and then got hired, but she's been here probably 5 or 6 years. Yeah, one of my part-time folks has been here probably actually going on 18 years. So I'm very, very fortunate. I wish I knew exactly why they stay here, because I know that there's opportunities to make more money out there, but I'm just very grateful that I have these phenomenal staff who've stayed with me all these years. And I think we make a good team. I do have positions that I don't, frankly, expect them to stay very long. And what I mean by that is, historically, very often we will hire some people, like, for example, doctoral students or something. And I know they're going to come here, kind of get us through a rough patch, maybe where we're just overwhelmed with cases, and then they'll probably leave. And that's okay. So I kind of had a sense, I've always had sort of two classes of therapists, the ones who are kind of the long-term folks, and then often the therapists who kind of come here, often for short periods of time. And I've had therapists who kind of have come and gone, and that's fine. Actually, that's great for us because we often have down periods like summertime, Christmas break period. These are often down times, and sometimes it's nice to have staff who just kind of take on less hours. Did I answer that question?
Yes.
Okay.
Jim?
So how did he become executive director? Because I know he said that he worked with sex offenders and then he did court mediation. So like through all the experience, once he applied, like that's what allowed him to like move up, or like how did he get to that?
So it's a great question because actually I was doing all these things simultaneously. So I got this executive director position. To be very frank, the woman who was my predecessor, I had worked with her previously at a different agency, and I maintained a relationship with her. And so when the job became open, they did interviews, but I definitely, threw my hat into the ring. Prior to this, I should be clear, I had also been, I had 2 management positions prior. When I was in Allendale, I oversaw staff. And then when I was at One Hope United, which used to be Central Baptist, and I ran those programs, I was the director of youth services. So it kept stepping up. And then so when this position came up, and I was a good fit for it at the time. But I was doing a lot of things simultaneously. So for example, the offender work I did for almost 20 years, but that was something I did in the evenings, 1 or 2 days a week. The mediation was also something I did while I was working full time. While I was doing the offender work, I was also doing mediation work. And then while I was doing mediation, while I was doing the offender work, while I was the director, I also started a practice. So in other words, I've often done, I'm not a person who kind of stops and starts. I just kind of keep adding things on. And then as I begin to figure out what's important to me, I kind of scale back and filter things out. Right now, about 2 years ago, I just said, I don't want to do the offender work anymore. I think I done it for long enough. I kind of lost my interest in it to some degree. I just didn't feel like it was the right place for me. And I pulled back from that. And I've now put a little more time into doing a little bit of practice work on the side. I would love to at some point teach. I know what Mark is doing is very fulfilling. And at some point I could easily see myself doing something like teaching over at CLC. So I like change. I've got to have things to stimulate me. So again, I hope I answered that question.
Thank you.
Sure. If you can do a nonprofit certificate, while you're getting your master's or over a summer, these little things are great ways to kind of bolster your resume. And everything else, like for example, the offender work, mediation, sometimes those just require maybe like a 40-hour course. And so you can often get that under your belt. And then I'm going to give you one other little word of guidance. Find a specialization. I think that it's very wide. It's great to be a generalist, but I always encourage people, find something that you're really passionate about and specialize in it. Take those additional classes, do the additional training. Some cases you can even get separate licensing for it. Like for example, with the offender work, that actually requires a separate license. So figure out that thing you're passionate about. Definitely have something. I mean, just even from frankly a marketing perspective, it's a good way to kind of market yourself, and it'll give you some sense of direction as well. Even if you ultimately wind up doing different things, and that's absolutely fine. But yeah, I would encourage everybody to figure some area of specialization. And there is a tremendous need for people to work with young children. Very few therapists in private practice want to work with young children, children 7 and under. I'm telling you, go get a certification in play therapy and you will have an exploding practice before you know it, because nobody does it, or very few people do it.
Do therapists work independently? Is there a lot of peer involvement? Or are they pretty much on their own?
So one of the wonderful things about working at an agency, particularly a nonprofit, is because we're not driven by revenues in the same way that a practice might be, or if you're obviously on your own. So we have a lot of time and flexibility to create a very supportive atmosphere. What I like to do, and I often encourage this, is first of all, we meet as a team for an hour and a half every week. And then I encourage the staff to go to each other for guidance on cases. I've got a therapist who's fantastic at play therapy in young children. So other therapists go to her for guidance. I've got a couple therapists who are really strong in trauma. People go to them. I supervise staff and I go to some of my staff who specialize in certain areas. One of my therapists is phenomenal at IEPs and school-related issues and school avoidance, and because she did that for 30 years, I go to her. So by doing that, what you're creating is the essential ingredient for all successful families and all successful long-term relationships as couples, which is interdependency. And that's one of the really wonderful things that you can find at a place like this, is that people become very interdependent in many ways, very supportive. Anyhow, I get it. I think that, I hope I answered that question, but that's my plug for working someplace like this, where you have the opportunity to really rely on each other. I do think talking to people in the practice world, what you do find is a lot of people in the practice world connect with groups on social media. There are a lot of wonderful groups out there, Facebook groups and other groups where people can meet once a week, once a month, and get some insight and feel supported. I will tell you, this is not a field that you should be doing kind of on your own like a cowboy. This is stressful, and your capacity to make a dumb decision without being aware of your own cultural biases is just so great that you need to have people. I often say to staff, even if you think you know what you're doing, if it's a decision that you're making that could impact somebody's life, you really need to stop and get somebody else's input to make sure you're viewing this the right way. So for example, if somebody has to make a hotline call, they will almost always, they will always check in with other people and say, hey, does this make sense? Is this worthy of a hotline call? Or in some cases, am I overreacting? Is this really not a hotline call situation? So you never want to be out there on your own. You've got to be in a supportive environment.
Other questions? So Adam, if you send me that brochure, a PDF of that, and I'm going to post it on my Moodle, so people will have access to some of the services that you do provide, and any other information on there that would be helpful for my class, it'd be great.
Okay, yeah, and I'm gonna send you one that's a little bit older. It's kind of pre-COVID. Everything during COVID has kind of gotten messed up. So I'm gonna send you a flyer, but it'll give a very good sense of how we're structured in the services we provide. So I'll send that over to you in a little while, okay?
Okay, I appreciate that. Any questions or comments? Adam, we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if any of you have anything that you want from me, any questions, you're eventually looking for an internship, whatever, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a call, okay?
And I'll leave that contact information up on Moodle as well.
Okay.
Great.
Have a good day, guys. Take care.